Good evening, everybody. Illegal immigration is surging, and so is the nation's trade deficit. The deficit, in fact, the highest ever. The deficit with China, a record high as well. The national emergency is worsening. The Border Patrol calling the crisis on our southern border now unsustainable, as a record number of illegal immigrant families have already been apprehended, breaking the yearly record in just 5 months into this fiscal year. The Department of Homeland Security expecting almost 1 million illegal immigrants to be arrested this year, in addition to what could be as many as 3 million illegals who avoid apprehension altogether. White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders today calling out the radical left's ignorance on border security.
It is absolutely abhorrent that Democrats are still refusing to acknowledge the crisis on the border, particularly when Barack Obama himself even called it a crisis in 2014. We know exactly what it is, and it's time they start doing their jobs and actually fixing it. They should follow the president. He is actually leading. It's time that somebody step up and follow the president and fix this problem.
And I would nominate, first of all, to follow him, the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. Tonight we take up the national security crisis at the border, the president's unceasing fight for border security, and oh yes, let's not forget the wall. Congressman Matt Gaetz, Congressman Jim Jordan, Republican strategist Ed Rollins, former DHS Special Agent Tim Ballard, all among our guests here tonight. The radical Dems couldn't bring themselves to vote against the stain of anti-Semitism that is spreading within the Democratic Party. Instead, they decided to defend Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, and today delayed a vote on a resolution that apparently couldn't be drafted to the satisfaction of the radical Dems. Omar's inflammatory anti-Semitic rhetoric apparently not enough for the Dems to denounce, nor enough for them to remove her from the Foreign Affairs Committee. Listen to how Committee Chair Elliot Engel responded to the question as to whether he was close to withdrawing Omar from the committee.
No, I'm not close to it. First of all, it's not up to me. This is done by the leadership. I don't know that would do anything except exacerbate the situation even more. I'm looking to get rid of anti-Semitism, not looking to punish anybody. I think that it's very important that we keep our eye on the prize.
Remember those words. Keep your eye on the prize. We take it all up tonight. The Washington Times opinion editor Charlie Hurt, Trump 2020 campaign press secretary Kayleigh McEnany, they join us. And the U.S. trade deficit soars to a 10-year high as imports from China increase, exports to China decline. What would that deficit have been unless President Trump had put tariffs on Chinese goods? Perhaps the tariff should be higher. What do you think? As high, for example, as what China puts on U.S. exports to China, as the president has said time and time again. Only fair and reciprocal trade will end the runaway, seemingly perpetual deficits, so why not act accordingly? And tonight, I'll take up what appears to be a profound and defining change in the president's policies on the workplace, on immigration, and support for working men and women and our middle class. This is a sad day without question. We take up that and, of course, much more here tonight. Our top story, the Democrats wallowing in disarray, no end in sight. The Dems hiding in cowardice today, kowtowing to radical groups within radical groups, calling on the radical party to water down a resolution that would condemn anti-Semitism. President Trump slammed the feckless Dems for their futile effort, tweeting, "It is shameful that House Democrats won't take a stronger stand against anti-Semitism in their conference. Anti-Semitism has fueled atrocities throughout history. It's inconceivable they will not act to condemn it." But fail to act they did. The Dems actively subverting the president as well on national security, ignoring the crisis at our border. More than 2,000 illegal immigrants are being apprehended each and every day at the border. Since October, more than 268,000 illegal immigrants have been apprehended, a 97% increase, almost double the same period a year ago. Despite this, the radical Dems are committed to a pretense that the border crisis doesn't exist at all. Joining me now on the shocking and pervasive dysfunction on Capitol Hill and what is going on with those radical Dems, Congressman Matt Gaetz, a member of the House Judiciary and Armed Services Committee. And Congressman, as always, it is awfully good to see you. Let's turn to the House Dems unable to condemn anti-Semitism.
Something is going on right now in the Democratic Party. You've got these new pipe-swinging progressives that are not like the Democrats of Al Gore and Bill Clinton back in the early 90s, and they are driving the message and the agenda and the energy within the Democratic Party right now. And when one of their own, Ilhan Omar, was concerned that some of the older, more established Democrats were singling her out, she was able to rally progressives to her cause. And I think that it says a lot about the direction of the Democratic Party. This is a group of people they're going to lead with the farthest left ideas that they can, because that's where the energy is in their party.
So what is the Republican Party going to do as a countervailing party that will be seeking votes as we approach 2020? I don't hear the Republicans standing up loud, proud, tall, and strong.
Well, you see the president doing that, tweeting about the dangers of anti-Semitism today.
Congratulations, Mr. President, you tweeted.
But
can we rise to a higher level than that, Congressman?
Well, the highest level this president rose to in support of Israel and showing the world that we are standing against anti-Semitism and with our ally was moving the embassy.
I tweet.
So, I mean, I think that moving the embassy is the most significant, tangible thing we've done. And
I'm talking about in reaction to, specifically, if I were not clear, and I know that you interpreted me correctly, this specific moment of anti-Semitism, the awful, awful remarks of this Congresswoman, and the absolute failure of the Democratic Party. We should be hearing from every Republican, in my opinion. Loud and clear.
Look, Republicans have stood strongly with Representative Lee Zeldin, who has led the effort on the Republican side to condemn anti-Semitism and to restate our unwavering
Congressman
support.
Zeldin is terrific.
But he is taking action, and we're standing with him. Here's the problem, Lou. What we don't want to do is unite the Democrats by making this like a Republican versus Democrat issue.
No, I've got to correct you, Congressman. Here's what you've got to do. You've got to unite the Republican Party. Let the Democrats take care of themselves. That's what you want to do.
I hear that, but right now you have an internal fight in the Democratic Party that is tearing them to pieces. This is merely one manifestation of that. My view for Republicans, let's go tell people what we believe. Let's back up those beliefs with strong action, like the president did moving our embassy to Jerusalem. And then let's go out and make our case to voters that we are a party that is actually moving forward with tangible things that show our commitment to our values and that's making the world a safer place. Meanwhile, you have the opposite with the Democrats.
Congressman, let's turn to the disarray within the Republican Party. You've got as many, according to Senator Rand Paul, as many as 10 Republicans who are going to vote against the president, vote for the resolution condemning the national emergency declaration. And you're talking to me about division within the Democratic Party, Congressman? What's going on with the Republicans?
The coyotes and traffickers and terrorists who are taking advantage of our southern border.
Congressman, I don't need you to persuade me there's a national emergency. We have been talking about the national emergency on this broadcast for 20 damn years.
Well, the problem is that we do have a challenge in the Republican Party where people don't see this as the emergency that it is. When you have enough fentanyl coming in the country to kill a third of the country, when you start to see MS-13 gang members popping up even in my district
I so
in
stipulate
Pensacola.
There is a crisis, as I said.
And
there is no doubt of it. What I'm asking is it a crisis within the Republican Party in which 10 senators would line up against the President of the United States, who is trying to secure the border and to protect our national sovereignty?
Of course it is. That is a terrible betrayal of the American people who voted for this president and who expect this wall to get built and illegal immigration to stop. And by the way, it's not just the wall. It's E-Verify. It's cracking down on sanctuary cities. It's ending chain migration. And I think it's looking at the issue of birthright citizenship when you have people that purposely take advantage of it.
Merit-based immigration, as the president has suggested. I have to tell you, I watched something today that I found sickening, and that was this president sitting next to Tim Cook at a CEO conference in the White House on the workplace, to be led by the advisory board led by Ivanka Trump and Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross. And what I heard was more labor arbitrage, more immigration, and more competition against the American worker at just the time the president's policies are paying off with higher wages for our working men and women and a strong economy. I found that dispiriting, and I found it an absolute reversal that to me is inexplicable.
Well, and I find it similarly disconcerting that a lot of those big technology companies are the very people who line up against the president's policies for reciprocal trade. I'm one of the sponsors of the Reciprocal Trade Act, and so we can't invite people in to help us solve our workforce challenges who then are lined up against us on the critical issue of making sure that we put American workers first and that we don't hollow out our middle class by sending jobs overseas because we're too foolish to make good trade deals. And so I think that having reciprocal trade and having people buy into that is really important to dealing with the long-term workforce challenges we have in the country.
You and I get to agree one more time. I thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Congressman Matt Gaetz, one of the great Americans representing faithfully his constituents and the nation. Still ahead, Congressman Jim Jordan joins us. Speaking of great Americans, we'll take up the Dems' never-ending harassment of this president. Up next, the president holds a White House meeting with corporatist global elites. What in the world is going on? We take that up here tonight, the topic of my commentary when we continue. Stay with us. President Trump's America First economic initiatives have produced higher wage growth in this country, higher productivity for American workers and business. The president's policies have forced U.S. companies to pay workers more money and to boost productivity. What are the numbers? American wages have risen 3% in the past year. They're projected to rise into 2020 by those projections, and at the same time, productivity projected to rise still. Tonight, I'd like to share a few thoughts, however, about what I fear is a new direction for the president and his administration, and what could very likely be a catastrophe for our working men and women, small business and entrepreneurs, our middle class, the American family, the very people this president has represented from the moment he announced he would run for the presidency. Now, I try never to overstate, let alone indulge in hyperbole, but what we watch unfold today at the White House was, to me, a disastrous policy turn and heartbreaking. What the White House billed is a meeting of major corporate CEOs who will serve on the president's Workforce Advisory Board, that board to be co-chaired by presidential advisor Ivanka Trump and Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross. Their purpose, their concerns, here's the president on both issues.
We're going to have a lot of people coming into the country. We want a lot of people coming in, and we need it. We want to have the companies grow, and the only way they're going to grow is if we give them the workers, and the only way we're going to have the workers is to do exactly what we're doing.
To be clear, the presence of the Chamber of Commerce President, Tom Donahue, is impossible to misinterpret. D.C.'s biggest lobbyist wants to reverse the direction of rising labor costs and return to the cheap labor policies of the 20 years that preceded the Trump presidency. I don't even know why this White House would let him in the door. He is the enemy of this administration and absolutely tries to reverse every policy in business and economics that this president has advanced. The White House could only muster, by the way, 7 corporate CEOs for this big event. In what should have been a reminder to the president's advisors and counselors that in politics as in life, it is important to never forget who your friends are. And if this White House thinks that listening to the beguiling prattle of Tim Cook, Tom Donahue, rhino senators like Susan Collins is helpful to this president, then the battle for the forgotten man and woman in this country will be decided by the very establishment this president ran against. an establishment that spends vast sums of money and energy every single day trying to destroy him and his policies and his historic presidency. That Mr. Trump would advance the interest of the globalist elites ahead of our citizens would be a tragic reversal on any day. But today, on the same day, the Commerce Department reported the United States had the largest trade deficit in our history. The same day, the president of the New York Fed said straightforwardly, economic growth is slowing, that the southern border is being overrun by record numbers of illegal immigrants. It all means the White House has simply lost its way, and that the nation's heart will be, after all, broken by the very same people who brought 50 years of consecutive trade deficit and the export of millions of middle-class jobs and who have fed the swamp for decades. I have a request tonight. Please let your congressman and this White House know what you think about all of this. And please, be very honest with them. I'd make the same request of the advisors and the counselors to this president who in this have served him and the nation so poorly. Joining me now, Tim Ballard. He's the founder and the CEO of Operation Underground Railroad, who specializes in stopping child trafficking. Tim is also a former special agent with the DHS. Tim, it is great. It is an honor to have you with us. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Lou.
We are hearing from the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security that the crisis on our southern border is unsustainable. The president has declared a national emergency, and a major political party has decided to avert its eyes and to pretend that this is all about politics, and particularly 2020, instead of national security and the well-being of the people, including the children that you work so hard to protect, citizens of Mexico, Central America, as well as American citizens. It is tragic. Your thoughts about where we are right now?
You know, my thoughts are this. Look, we have one of the highest demands for child sex in the United States, right here. And so traffickers, with these millions of kids that they control throughout the world, they're trying to get these kids into the United States. And I've been combating this as an undercover operator for over a decade along the southern border. I know how horrible this problem is. I've got these, I have these child victims, these survivors, who I'm taking around. They want their voices heard, and they're being ignored. The concept of a wall and a barrier, this would save their lives. This would drive the traffic into the ports of entry where law enforcement can save their lives, and they feel like this is sad. It's being so politicized that these kids, their lives are in danger because we're losing potentially one of the greatest tools we have to rescue them.
Have you ever heard the president of the Chamber of Commerce or the head of the Round Table or a Wall Street CEO talk about child sex trafficking across the border? Have you ever heard one of them? Because I haven't.
I certainly have not. This is off people's radar, and it should be the most important thing. There's more children today, there's more people today in modern-day slavery than ever before in the history of the world. This is a crisis of epic proportions, and it's happening at our southern border.
And I listened to Kristen Nielsen, the Secretary of Homeland Security. You work for DHS. Say that this is unsustainable, that it's a crisis. And all I could think is the president had just mentioned yesterday 30,000 women and children who are being smuggled into this country for sex trafficking, along with the 80,000 opiate deaths from the resulting from the smuggling of all those drugs. All I could think of is I'm listening to the woman who is responsible for the security of that border and the agency that employs tens of thousands dedicated to protecting us from that border. I'm wondering where the hell the military is. I'm wondering where the Border Patrol is. I have to tell you, I'm wondering where the hell is all that wire that was strewn. I've heard a lot of talk about a border wall being started, and yet I'm looking at the prospect, if you take the old measure, which is 3 to 1, for every apprehension, 3 get through on that border. We're talking about as many as 4 million illegal immigrants entering this country this year. What is going on?
You know, and it's even worse than that. We talked about, I testified today before the Senate Judiciary Committee, and we talked about the stats, the numbers. There's been a 360% increase in adults who are smuggling children who are not their children. These are unaccompanied minors. They're using these children as pawns because if you can bring a child, you can claim amnesty, believe it or not. And so these kids are being kidnapped, they're being taken, they don't belong to the people being smuggled. The cartels get control of them, smuggle them in, and they can turn it into a sex trafficking situation right away because they can make a lot of money. These children are so vulnerable, and it saddens me that truly it's being ignored.
What can we do first for those children?
We need to be loud and tell the truth and listen to the facts that 1,700 children were brought in the last 10 months without parents. You know, someone pretending to be this is their child. It's not their child. You know, if we have a heart as a nation, we are going to put these kids first. These children who are vulnerable, they're being abused, they're being raped. The New York Times is even reporting it this week that several women who were being smuggled in they had to pay for their transport with their bodies. And you know, the infrastructure would curb this, no question about it. A wall, a barrier, a smart wall will curb this because it forces the traffickers to take those children through the ports of entry where they can be rescued.
And as you know, Tim, this president is the only one who's had the guts to even talk about the cartels, the only president I've ever heard even mention who was behind the human smuggling, the sex trafficking, the drugs, the corruption on both sides of the border. Tim Ballard, thanks for everything you do, have done, and will do. We will do better ourselves at making certain your message is heard loud and clear. We appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Tim Ballard, thank you. Politics, too mean for the likes of former President Barack Obama. Ed Rollins joins me next to talk about meanness, but I also want to talk with him about just, well, inefficiency, ineffectiveness. Obama is back making snarky comments in Canada, yes, in Canada, about unnamed political leaders. The president apparently did not, well, I don't know if he was being principled or perhaps, well, let's say reluctant to mention a name, but he said politics now is too often about, quote, being louder, noisier, more self-centered, greedier, being more aggressive. He did mention self-centered, didn't he? Oh, that makes sense. He also claimed Sarah Palin's vice presidential run paved the way for President Trump's election. Thank you, Sarah Palin. Joining us tonight, former Reagan White House political director, Fox Business political analyst, Republican strategist, and savant, Ed Rollins. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Let me start. Do I really want to start with, no, I don't, a former president. Let's talk about the current president and a White House advisory group on the workplace that seems to be nothing more than a pretense for labor arbitrage, a return to cheaper labor instead of rising wages in this country and rising productivity. And frankly, it's not only a reversal, potentially a betrayal of the forgotten men and women in this country this president ran for, and I am not in any way exaggerating.
Well, you didn't notice any working people there today. The bottom line is this was a group put together by Ivanka and Jared Kushner, who basically were Democrats before they got to the White House and now basically want everybody to love them and their philosophy, which is not what Trump got elected on.
This is disastrous.
It's a disaster. It's an absolute disaster. And the reality is, Jared is running around the hill now, pretending he's a congressional relations person because he signed the president on a criminal justice bill that was a Democrat bill. They're now basically trying to advocate.
I want to compliment the Trump administration on the legislation, on the deal. But let's be clear, in terms of deal making, what they did was ask for the Democrats to support the Democrats' idea of what should be.
Right. And
that's a pretty tough, easy way to do it.
The truth of the matter is President Obama could have been at the head of that table today when they had all those executives there talking about exactly the same thing. It's not what Trump was about. It's not what Trump got elected about. Trump got elected by working people who...
Where the hell is his staff? Forgive me for swearing. I got to take that back. My wife will have a fit with me. But the truth is, Where are his advisors? Where is his director of communications, Bill Shine? Where are his political advisors? Who in their right mind would have this president put in 180-degree opposition to what he ran on and promised American workers, what he's delivered? He's a historic president.
At a time that the two most important issues he's fighting for are the wall, which they're all opposed to.
Why doesn't he fire Kirstjen Nielsen? Why doesn't he fire his secretary? She's supposed to be guarding that border, and I don't want to hear about how tough it is. She's got tens of thousands of people. Right. Where the heck is the military? Where is all the concertina wire? Well, where is the enforcement?
Well, you've had people on this show, including your just immediate past guest, the kinds of people that have stood on that border and defended it and know the reality of it. And his message and every other guy who's been on that border, a woman who's been on that border, know the problem. It is a disaster. It is a catastrophe. It's something that's going to destroy this country long term. And this president is 100% right. The second issue is the trade issue. None of these guys are for the trade policies. That whole group that was up there today are totally opposed to Trump on every single issue. Why let them in the White House?
He has forgotten who his friends are.
Absolutely.
He's forgotten who the hell his enemies are.
Right.
And that, I put at the feet of his so-called advisors. If the president doesn't start firing people for incompetence and absolutely just anti-Trump conduct, I mean, this goes beyond not doing the job. They're fighting this president.
Well, they're in a war, and the war is every Democrat's going to throw every hand grenade at him that they can, and he just needs to fight back, get a team that'll fight back with him.
A country is depending on it.
Absolutely.
More's the shame. Ed Rollins.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Thank you. Up next, the Mueller report quickly becoming a top seller. We're being absolutely serious. Long before it's released, and by the way, there's a Harvard former professor who's going to do very well at it. I hope he donates to several of charities that I share. Tonight, Congressman Jim Jordan joins us here in just a moment as the Dems and Rhinos work to subvert this president. And apparently some are succeeding, given what I witnessed at the White House today. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Francisco, that he was shocked by the scale of China's counterintelligence cyber threat against this country. Apparently, this is the first time he's learned that the United States does have enemies. If he had been paying attention to the last 5 years, he might have known that. One wonders about this fellow. And Amazon already taking pre-orders for the Robert Mueller Special Counsel Witch Hunt Report. Taking orders, it's selling, by the way, for less than $10. It comes with a foreword by Professor Alan Dershowitz, by the way. The listed release date is March 26th. I'd like to know how they know that. They're pretty well informed, apparently. Joining us tonight, a man who's always well informed, Congressman Jim Jordan, great American, ranking member of the House Oversight Committee, member of the Judiciary Committee, a co-founder of the House Freedom Caucus. Congressman, I've got to turn to, first of all, have you put it in your order for the Mueller report?
No, Lou, good to be with you. I didn't know that they knew already, for goodness sake. We think it's coming anytime soon, and just by the fact that it's been almost 2 years, it's got to come sometime soon. But I didn't know they could be this specific, so no, I don't have my order in yet.
By the way, I was thinking it would be coming pretty soon last fall, so I'm over my projecting when it's going to arrive. I want to turn first to the Department of Homeland Security Secretary, talking about the crisis at our southern border is unsustainable. Yet I don't know what the military is doing down there. I don't know what happened to the concertina wire. Yeah. I don't know what's happened to the Border Patrol. I saw pictures today of Border Patrol, and I know there's got to be more than these Border Patrol agents that I witnessed standing around as illegal immigrants are crouched on the ground, sitting on the ground in many cases. It is not a very good picture, and I can't understand why she's not being held accountable for the department that she is running.
And I can't understand why the United States Senate's going to vote for the emergency, vote against the president in his emergency declaration. I would argue that the Republicans in particular who are going to vote against it are the same Republicans who didn't want to do it last Congress when we had a majority when we controlled the House and the Senate. And this is most certainly an emergency. I think the New York Times reported yesterday 70-some thousand last month alone illegal crossings.
Right.
Last month alone. So the two things that have to happen, and we've talked about this, and you've been great talking about this, two things that have to happen. Build the border security wall, reform our asylum laws. You have to stop the incentive, or we're going to have an endless caravan, because the incentive is always going to be there to get to this country, get inside this country, and then the catch and release policy because of our asylum laws. That's what is incentivizing so much of this, and that has got those two things. If we do those two things, that would be the most important effort we can have right now. Then we can get to all the other issues about immigration.
But then, of course, as you well know, there would still be the Obama and Clinton appointed judges, particularly in the Ninth Circuit, particularly up in Northern California, who would be working against every policy, every initiative of this president to block him from securing the border, stopping illegal immigration, stopping asylum seekers. What happened to the return to Mexico policy to stop asylum seekers? This Homeland Security Department is enforcing nothing of what this president says. And why not challenge those courts and challenge the activist judges? And by the way, what about Chief Justice Roberts, who said there are no Obama-appointed judges or Bush-appointed justices or Trump? They're just good old judges. I mean, what kind of nonsense and pablum are we being fed by the man responsible for the FISA courts and the United States Supreme Court?
Yeah, you had a lot in there, Lou, and it was all good. But I will tell you what, in spite of
I'll do it by segments in the future.
In spite of all these entities and efforts against the president, think about what has been accomplished in 2 years. And this list, it could be a lot longer, but taxes down, regulations down, economy growing at an unbelievable rate, lowest unemployment in 50 years, Gorsuch and Kavanaugh on the court, out of the Iran deal, embassy in Jerusalem, hostages home from North Korea, new NAFTA agreement. I mean, the market growing like it's been an amazing 2 years. In spite of the fact,
2 years.
In spite of the fact, so what we have to do is we just have to continue to do what we said. Keep fighting hard, keep pushing in spite of all the opposition that's against us. And if we have that attitude, this is America. We'll get it right eventually. We'll get those good policy outcomes that we ultimately need, in spite of the left, in spite of the mainstream press, in spite of some Republicans that don't want to support the president. We will get there. And that's the attitude the president has. That's the attitude the folks in the Freedom Caucus have, the Republicans in the House have. So we just got to keep that attitude and keep fighting away.
Well, to quote a great legislator and great American, you put a lot in there. It was all good, and frankly, Congressman, I needed that. I am sitting here still boiling over what I saw this president contend with and advocate today in the White House, reversing his immensely successful, as I said, historic policies on the working man and woman in this country, the forgotten man, and to buy the bull that's been fed him by the likes of Tom Donahue and the other phonies that were sitting in the room with him.
Now look what the president's up against. 81 different letters Jerry Nadler sent out 2 days ago to 60-some individuals. They're coming after the White House in every way they can. But of those 81 letters, 60-some individuals, it's interesting to me, the two individuals that they didn't send a letter to, the two most important in my judgment, Glenn Simpson, the guy who was paid by the Clinton campaign to put together the dossier, and Christopher Steele, the guy Glenn Simpson hired, a foreigner, to write the dossier that started this whole crazy ordeal. Those two didn't get a letter from Jerry Nadler, which shows what these guys are up to. The Mueller report is not going to say what they wanted. It's not going to. They put all their eggs in that basket. I don't think it's going to say what they wanted, which, it's going to say there was no collusion, I think. And so they got to figure out something else. So they go on this fishing expedition, but they don't go after the two people to get information from the two most important people that started this whole thing.
Congressman, I particularly enjoyed when you and I talk past each other. I'm talking illegal immigration and trade and the working man and woman and the middle class families. And you're talking truth, justice, and the American way. And I like that as well.
I'm talking about you are the forces against this president, the forces against the American people. That's what we got to keep fighting against and make sure we get the right things done.
Amen, brother. Thank you, Congressman.
You bet, Lou. Take care.
Tonight, Charlie Hurt, Washington Times opinion editor, Fox Business contributor. Charlie, good to see you. Kayleigh
Good to see you.
McEnany, who is National Press Secretary for the Trump 2020 campaign. Kayleigh, good to have you back with us, too.
Good to see you.
Let's start with the trade deficit. This president has been working has been working hard to eliminate those trade deficits, applying tariffs. And guess what? 2018, record trade deficits. Kayleigh, what's going on?
Well, here's what's going on is this president inherited a trade disaster on Inauguration Day. No president before him had the courage to take on our trade deficits, which increased year after year. This president is going after it. He's torn up NAFTA, renegotiated the USMCA, looking to negotiate a deal with Japan, working with China. We know that there's a global recession or global retraction in the economy happening. The
Kayleigh?
U.S. dollar is strong. Yes.
The deficit for 2018 was an all-time high. The deficit with China was an all-time high. It also puts the lie to all of those, particularly in the in business, the multinationals who said, and the Fed, by the way, we want to bring in the Fed, who said that those tariffs would create a problem. Charlie, your thoughts, if you want to offer them up on the trade deficit. I know it's an exciting topic, and I apologize to you both.
I failed math. I failed although as bad as I am at math, I'm not nearly as bad at math as everybody in Washington, because these people, they're beyond stupid when it comes to math here in Washington. But hey, if people want to criticize Donald Trump for a booming economy, have at it. I mean, there's no way around that.
Yeah, I want to turn to, I know that you excelled in decency, and the failure of the Democratic Party to condemn Congresswoman Omar and anti-Semitism, withdrawing that resolution. Were you stunned, as I was?
Yeah, quite frankly, and I mean, the really scary part here is that this woman, she's not just representing herself. I think she's representing an increasing, a growing part of the Democratic Party that really does question Israel and questions our loyalty to Israel. And it's not. This is not just sort of a seat of the pants kind of thing. It's part of a growing political belief on the far left, and it's terrifying.
And Kayleigh, she's got the Democratic Party scared to death of her. Watching Engel, the chair of Foreign Affairs, I mean, he was a frightened man. Nancy Pelosi is understanding that she may be in some considerable trouble here. She obviously doesn't know what to do. Which, how about the right thing suddenly is not the right thing?
That's exactly right, Lou. I've had so many Democratic commentators say to me, no, AOC doesn't rule this party. The radicals don't rule this party. We have all these moderates in the House that are ruling the party. Well, clearly you don't, when you can't even pass a resolution condemning anti-Semitism. Guess who rules this party? It is Ilhan Omar. It's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And the Democratic 2020 contenders notably are taking her side, Kamala Harris and Bernie Sanders.
And Charlie, speaking of AOC, we got about 25 seconds, I'm told. Your thoughts about how much liability faces her for her FEC problems?
Goodness, I certainly hope so. But I don't think the media, who's in the thrall of her crazy socialist ideas as much as a lot of the Democrats are, I don't think they're going to take her to task over
Francisco, that he was shocked by the scale of China's counterintelligence cyber threat against this country. Apparently, this is the first time he's learned that the United States does have enemies. If he had been paying attention to the last 5 years, he might have known that. One wonders about this fellow. And Amazon already taking pre-orders for the Robert Mueller special counsel witch hunt report. Taking orders, it's selling, by the way, for less than $10. It comes with a foreword by Professor Alan Dershowitz, by the way. The listed release date is March 26th. I'd like to know how they know that. They're pretty well informed, apparently. Joining us tonight, a man who's always well informed, Congressman Jim Jordan, great American, ranking member of the House Oversight Committee, member of the Judiciary Committee, a co-founder of the House Freedom Caucus. Congressman, I've got to turn to, first of all, have you put it in your order for the the Mueller report?
No, Lou, good to be with you. I didn't know that they knew already, for goodness sake. You think it's coming anytime soon, and just by the fact that it's been almost 2 years, it's got to come sometime soon. But I didn't know they could be this specific, so no, I don't have my order in yet.
By the way, I was thinking it would be coming pretty soon last fall, so you know, I'm over my projecting when it's going to arrive. I want to turn first to the Department of Homeland Security Secretary talking about the crisis at our southern border is unsustainable. Yet I don't know what the military is doing down there. I don't know what happened to the concertina wire. I don't know what's happened to the Border Patrol. I saw pictures today of Border Patrol, and I know there's got to be more than these